So it's so important, which is a military operation. So and then the other thing, and we'll get on to some other details. When they discovered that the high fructose sugar syrup creates obesity, because it's actually non-nutritional and toxic. So one of the things that the daughters of the DAR presented was to promote cheap sodas in the community, target at our community, because it would make the women constantly lose weight, and then the European women could compete with them. Because whereas our women, they wouldn't be out of shape until they're like in their maybe 70s or 80s. Chill out, Now they was like 30, 35, and they walk around with canes. It's Islam.
Islam. I was in a corner store a couple of days ago, and I noticed that they had, I can't remember the name of it, they had new chips. And the chips had boards on them with, chains and different things. And the first thing that came to mind was, there was no way in the world that I would buy a bag of chips that had somebody that looked like me's face plastered on it, because I would assume they're targeting, and that they probably have some, crooked intention of what we know.
Yeah, they do. Unfortunately, but it's true. Because we are targeted. But again, it even goes down to are people not being honest about themselves being powerless, although they're always boasting about special relationship with God type thing. In truth, they feel powerless. That's why they uplift the European, and they refuse to call him anything but their great white father. And so rather than, so they can kind of maintain some of their hypocrisy, they'll just say white man. See, so that kind of smooths it out a little bit. But of course, people who know language know that they're answering up to their sovereign. Because the European changed places in 1854. That's what the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath is, and the symbolism for that trade-off is called the Mummers Parade that they celebrate in Philadelphia. This is why they assemble at 6 and Moore Street. And then they go west, Young Man, Horace Greeley. They turn at 90 degrees on Broad Street, and the parade ends at the mosque, the architectural mosque, which is City Hall. You step back, you see it's Ionic and Moorish architecture, designed like a mosque, including the parapet. And then they put William Penn, who chartered in Chester, at the top of a 23.5 degrees axis of the earth facing the Masonic Lodge, North Broad Street. Then they have, that's the primal lodge where they have George Washington, who's credited with converting the Moorish estates into the states. And of course that whole intrigue has, much to do with the real politics. And also the appeal of the Prophet Noah for the Moors to help them in the great missionary work to enforce the Constitution, because it's a covenant. It's a covenant. And that's what binds them. And this is again why, as people begin to wake up, why the Europeans start putting out variations of commercial code presentments to imply a retention or restoration of right in a trading platform, uniform commercial codes, and thinking that if they follow with the Inquisition revenue operators called the Internal Revenue Service, that under certain conditions with some filings that they would be able to get some revenues from their estate controlled by the Jesuit order. So that's where you get them HMOs from, the Uniform Commercial Code operations, the financial statements, etc. And now the birth certificates, since Franklin Delano Roosevelt used them as bonds after the United States corporation shell crashed, in 25. that they covered up until 28, and then it just smashed out, you know, in the early 30s, and then they used the birth certificates to set up another shell, which existed, you know, up until September 2013. And then they did some more corruption, stealing Germany's gold and stuff like that, and then dropped them buildings and told everybody that Muslims did it with a box cutter from the cave in Afghanistan and stuff like that. Started that war, and then they just crashed with September the 30th of this year. You know, and so so these whole problems are rooted in the imposters. And so the problem that you have right now on the political forum is that the heirs, having been deceived by their own, not just Europeans, by their own, are so far behind. There's two problems. There's two logistical problems that are operating right now. The one is their level of ignorance makes them a deadweight burden on civilization. So the Europeans are trying to use that as a justification to exterminate so-called black people. Of course, they have the obligation in international law to have waking them up. This is dealing with when you're dealing with United Nations decolonization of 1960. It's what we decolonizing all colonial governments. Of course, that didn't take place. Then when R.A.M. Emanuel went to expose the history to what Nobrali was doing to the people that the Moors are the heirs to the land, they're the true Aboriginal people. And then they signed the rights of indigenous people when Obama came back, and all the churches and civic groups were instructed by the international community to distribute that information at all costs. Of course, you already know that's not been done. Now, and so Europeans been accelerating to try to kill these people off and create diseases, because this is the principle that they're operating on. To make them pay to help us kill them. So this is like if you go in Philadelphia, you go anywhere in major cities, you'll see hospitals going up, like if they can find a hole, they'll put it in there. Children's hospitals and everything like that, because they're going to kill these people. And these people still believe in them. So they're going to kill off as many as, and they will be successful to some degree. You know, now that's the reality. And that's because our people believe in them. You know, but, and if it hadn't been for the Manchurian Masons and a lot of the perfected assassins from some of the old Chinese families, it'd be even worse in our community. But because of China's countering them, that has stagnated a lot of their plans. This has to do with a lot of the politics that's going on now in the world. If it wasn't for Chinese stepping in, you'd see a lot more dead Asiatics here. And they would have openly declared the martial law that already exists, actually even earlier. Now, so Trump was assigned to keep the dog and pony show going, and as an excuse to implement martial law openly. It already exists, but they're going to do it openly, because what's happening is nobody's buying their bonds. And so, like in the movie The Wizard of Oz, where the house falls down onto the wicked witch, and her stockings curl up under the house, so the stocks are curling up. You know, and so the deal of it is their whole platform is being exposed, so they don't have time to create. They still do it, but they don't have time to create deceptive programs, so they're just coming right bluntly out and doing their unum sanctum policy. Now, with people who don't know the history, it confuses them. People know the history, it's not a surprise, it's just that they don't have the time. They don't have the convenience, because the world is on them. And their platform is burning. Cold fire, if you will. You know, so they're going in circles. It's sort of like a phoenix bird eating its own tail to feed its young. Ooh. If you get the point, or like you see that snake, don't tread on me, eating its own tail. It's the same principle. That's what's happening with them. So even with a lot of the political platforms that they've set up and that they're operating now, they wouldn't even be as successful as they are if they didn't have the numbers of traitors or conversos among us who keep that black thing going, deliberately knowing that it makes the people not discernible. But this is, but by people not being able to read, they don't know that. They think that that means Afrocentricity. But the issue is descendability and heirship. Again, we try in different ways and to kind of to do the best that we can with our limitations to get the people to start thinking from the perspective of heirs, because almost most of the time when you talk to our people, they're always thinking from a subordinated mentality. They have to apply for this and apply for this and fill out this when they're the heirs to the world's largest estate. And so every time in law and in due process, by the heirs having such a subordinated mind, it's easy for the Romans to continuously declare them black wards of the state, which makes them not descendable. And of course, with enough so-called black leader guys running the show and being funded by the corporations, this dynamic continues. However, the point that I'm making is it's very important, and one of the reasons why I went over this again is because I find that a lot of times when people come around conscious Moors or go to Moorish institutions to start getting educated, that they be attacked by people who claim to have grand positions, who attack civic instruction, who literally attack constitutional enforcement, and do not teach constitutional enforcement. It's another reason why it's important for people to read the Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nation, so they can see for themselves what his missionary work actually is, was, and is, and currently is. And again, if it wasn't for Manchurians, a lot more of these people that are sitting around debating non-debatable issues might not be breathing. But they don't even know that that's how far this thing actually is right now. I think for all of us, for our interest for some of the youth to have an opportunity or a chance, is to make sure that this information gets out, because most of the older people are pretty much compromised and probably will be expended. They're expendable. And it gets to a point that it's not practical to keep arguing or to try to convince people or to try to appeal to the next generation, because the truth's going to have to come from the youth, because the other ones, they love Constantine, hiding behind Jesus. They know that they are, but they think that the world doesn't know that. And this is back to the game when you see other Asiatic, when certain passwords we use, the Negro, Black, and then you see other Africans back off. That's why. And pretty much most of them, I can't say that because I've talked to some nationals, but not to such a degree, but you can kind of pick between some of the conversations where a lot of them have come to the conclusion that we're a lost cause. And that maybe the world would be better off if they just step back and let the Europeans eliminate the traders who think they're going to get a benefit. And then maybe from what's left, we can start rebuilding civilization. If you really look at the patterns, if you look at the legislative patterns of both things that are operating under the color of operations, and also the way that other Asiatic nations are binding themselves together and leaving this whole platform to burn off. It's like that, like the story in the book of Revelation where they're stepping off from the harlot, letting it burn, including their allies. If you look at the politics, that's the problem that they're having right now. When I say they, I'm talking about the European imposters dealing with the U.S. democracy platform that's been pretending to be the nation, that still a lot of people, and particularly the heirs, don't know it is not the nation. You know what I mean? And the difficulty that they're having trying to find anyone who will buy their bonds. Anyone. And then using their military to force, say, vassal states like Japan, there's a few others, but mostly Japan and Germany, vassal states, to buy their bonds. But
vassal state?
Vassal?
Yeah, vassal state, what is that?
Vassal states are like subordinate fronts. In other words, serfs, persons who are actually enslaved, but they pretend that they have legitimate operative government when they really don't. Meaning that if the United States Service Corporation hadn't robbed Japan, as an example, a couple of years ago and stole all of their government funds and then put that bomb off the shore and created that tsunami, the United States Corporation would have collapsed it then. So what they've been doing, they've been murdering people, stealing their resources to kick the can down the road. And they're running out of friends. And the only friends that they really kind of have is the fake nation they call Israel, and of course England, and of course some of the P2 Masons, not all of them, because they got a split going on there in the Vatican too. So that's the real politics that they're dealing with. Meanwhile, our people who are the heirs still are in this like soup of ignorance. Not knowing how close they are to the edge of the cliff. Because they got hopes that they're going to get a job that they're not going to get. They're going to get death. You know, that's what Rome's plan is, because Rome knows. See, this is the other deal. The suppressed technologies of not new, but the ancient world, even a little bit of it would solve most of the earth problems. However, at the same time, what it will do is crush the social, political, fake colored paradigm that's been operating for the last few hundred years on the earth planet. That is totally, in reality, pretty much false. You know, but to assess it honestly, if it were not for the ecological damage of what is called the Medea effect that's about to kick in, that the dark priesthood would block this a little bit more. So the idea that they had was to kill off, well, they say 90%, but predominantly the Asiatic Africans, etc., go underground, then come back up and then clean this mess up. Because really, within actually weeks or days, they can actually reverse the effect of the cesiums and other nuclear waste that has lifespans up to 137 years and more, with the people thinking that it can't be cleaned up. You know, but because of this particular solar system coming to the center, or the Earth, this Earth satellite coming to the center of this particular solar system, the energy is changing. And this includes with the Aquarian energy. Where the Aquarian energy and Uranus, when you look at the universe, the particular solar system, when you look back a few millennia, you have Saturn, the energy of Saturn that usually ruled in the Aquarian constellation. And then after multiple cycles, you have the Uranus energy ruling in the Aquarian constellation. The unique thing that you have in this cycle is that Uranus and Saturn is ruling the Aquarian cycle, or the constellation together. So this is more like a purification era that Yahshua talk about, that they say when Jesus talked about, you know, this new time or this new coming, or Jesus come again, or justice come again, this is totally unique. Not exactly, but yes, again, because Uranus and Saturn is ruling. So you're dealing with the Uranian energy, which it's a highly electrical charge. So anything that is not in honor or sincere, it will tear it down. And then the energy of the Saturn energy cashes all checks. To put it, you know, in a child's way, so a child can understand it. Meaning, you sell a wolf ticket, you're not going to get to the next life to try to play around. You're going to cash it, if not immediately. See, but the high priests know this because they know how divine law works. The masses got dogma. The high priests have religion. You keep in mind, because part of the problem that we have is that the masses have been trained in thinking that they've been trained in religion. The masses have never been given religion. The masses get dogma. The same way the masses aren't allowed to handle money, they get fiat and think it's money. Yeah, right. Which means they're never empowered. And the same way they have dogma and spirit religion, which is why they cannot solve spiritual problems. And so that gives the paid off priesthood the kingship oligarchy position that they have to stand behind the pulpit and rape the people in the name of Jesus, in the name of Allah, in the name of Muhammad, whichever flavor ice cream the people need. And then when in secret, they all got all the books. You know, this is where the debate with the priesthood have with Yahushua, where Jesus was disputing with the doctors of the law. That's the priesthood. That's who the demon is. See, so the priesthood, and the demon, the devil's over there behind the curtain. He taking all your peanut butter sandwiches and stuff, and everybody looking for this mystical devil. It's the priest. This is why this thing has worked so well. You know, and so when the prophets come, you know, ain't no devil go sacrifice the prophets. It's always been the priesthood. Always have been the priesthood. But to get there, sweet, it's like that. Go ahead, Dr. Nayo.
It's Jeremiah chapter 5 talks about that, exposes that, exactly what you're talking about the priesthood being the culprits.
They are. Yes,
that is the exact scripture which woke me up from, you know,
and this is again
place where I was. Yeah.
When you look at politics on the Earth planet, that in more or less a layman's type statement, although it must be qualified, and there are gray areas, not in the sense that that they're not degrees, but in the gray areas when you say that any man that's in power, in any serious position of power on earth, must be a Mason. And any woman that's in any serious position of power on earth must be an Eastern Star. You know, or daughter of American Revolution, daughter of ISIS, and in secret wear a Moorish fez, while pretending not to know that these people are Moors. Even though it's right in their faces, you know what I mean? But, and it's because they must know the real history and the real foundation of unum sanctum operations, so that they themselves, when put in position of administrative operations, can wear the titles, or would say imposter, as an example, where a person, man or woman, can claim to be a judge when actually they're ministers, or they're administrators over a trust in subordinate levels. So, and this is back to the imposter type stuff, you know. And so people who have been beneficiaries of this corruption don't want this kind of information out. You know, even though they may themselves belong to organizations that purport to be helping the people. You know, as an example, let me show you as an example. We can go back to this. I'm going to show you something as an example. This is Michigan, as an example. And you already know this is the old trade route triangle that's been operating, for centuries. Actually, even prior, although the traditions have been maintained amongst some of the Israelites, etc. And so that's the Great Lake. So you know the War of 1812 and the battle of the Moorish Navy. That's the vital point of the battle of 1812. And of course, the Great Triangle, the Great Trade Route. They come up through Boston and all that area, and we go over here, etc., to Muhammad, also to Morocco, and then the women would meditate around the lakes. And you already know all of those lakes are man-made. All those were made with atomic power. They were not natural lakes. They were made in the ancient world for fresh water for the Western Hemisphere. And this is where they murdered a lot of the Asiatic women at Niagara Falls. And then them fake Jews took over the Niagara movement and named it the NAACP. And in its charter, they cannot own property. And then you see so many years and generations, people have actually been supporting institutions and organizations that are presented to them as if to help them when it's actually intended to make them serfs or vassals on their own land. And this is why the 33-degree Mason, when he recognized that he was getting ready to be neutralized, made a statement, which also sealed his fate too, when he said our people are refugees in their own land. That Mason's name was Martin Luther King. Again, it behooves our people, rather than all the ways be necessarily controlled by people who know the real history, who are taking oaths to Rome and are getting benefits while pretending that our people are black and Negroes, knowing it makes them non-descendable, and then taking up all of their resources and financial energies in nigger organizations, marching them all around the place, when the real deal is they're supposed to be enforcing the covenant, which is the Constitution. Again, while we go back to the fundamentals, which Raleigh said, help me in my great missionary work, to enforce that Constitution. And of course, when you go back, again, you'll find the difference between the organic, which means the real, and the inorganic, which means the fake. All right? And so the U.S. democracy is the fake government with fake people, with traitors, distinguished from the republic, which is the platform upon which the peace treaty was determined or laid for peace between the Muslims and the Christians, i.e. the Moors and the Constantinians, or the Albion sons. And of course, when you're dealing with the Whiggamore Party and the operations of the European taking on the title white people in 1854, that deals with Horace Greeley, etc. And so the Whiggamore parties, the Europeans used to wear wigs to imitate the Moors. Whiggamore party split, and this is the fundamental of the politics, where they plan incrementally to kill off the heirs and to take your place. All right? Now, these are facts. These are the realities of the politics. And I think, again, because so many political promises have been made in between incrementally over the generations, the people actually start believing in the system. Not knowing that the system is in place for fraud. The system is in place for the transfer or the conversion of your estate. And it is in place to kill off the real heirs. That's just the real truth. So as the people start waking up, this is again why, the Europeans who are imposters are pressed to put out all these different platforms, all relating to the unum sanctum operative global estate trust, and making people think they're going to get their hands on it, whether they deal with HMOs, uniform commercial codes, financial statements, and now the birth certificates. And when that runs out, they'll find something else. But you go cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle, and you'll see a handful of people that get a couple of cookies that to keep the other ones in their blind faith while they incrementally start killing the people off. And so the big secret, they don't want to know that these people know their home. You understand? This Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, you just bumped your head. You know, so when you understand the different, see, so from a Kabbalistic and from a karmic perspective, with the European through different systems tell you certain truths, although codified, that kind of takes the karmic debt off of them, if you get the point. And then by us also claiming to be, I said that we are, claim to be so spiritual, that also takes weight off of him, because we're always claiming God's, and so therefore, he's not responsible because we keep claiming to have all this superior, supreme, divine power. And we got all these sandwiches going on. As far as the world's concerned, we should be making our own sandwiches. But we always beg. Whether we begging for Jesus, God, Lord, in heaven, and come back and give us sandwiches, whatever. Yeah, go ahead, Doc.
My question is, you earlier on you said, about Rome turning the world upside down.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean,
in reality,
from a geographic standpoint.
to cut it short,
Yes.
in reality, the Mappamundi, or what is called the world map, actually, if you look at all of the continents, because everything deals with Aleph, or A. So, north, when you're dealing with America, A, Asia, A, Africa, A, Australia, Antarctica. The only ones that's not in A is Europe, which really isn't a continent. And it's politically established, you see? So you're dealing with anode-cathode principle, the Holy Cross, or the mundane cross of the earth. But in truth, if you really want to understand the map, just take Australia and put it at the top. And you got the real operations, including the size of the continents. But because that's not subject matter at this time, I'm not going into that. But that's basically just turn it upside down. And you turn it upside down and take...
We're talking about the shape. So when we see something going like this, it probably goes...
Yeah, South Asia, or Asia Sword, which is now called Tamari in Africa, that's South Asia. That's Asia Minor, what they call Africa today, is actually much bigger than they show it on the map on Monday, etc. But take Asia Sor, and then take the horn of where you see Sierra Leone, Tunis, Algeria, Morocco, the Kingdom, and put them right in the Gulf of Mexico. And then if you put your head that way, you can start looking at the world more properly. Say it a little louder, please.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah. Good. So the concept, see, when the cocoa plates shift, because the Asiatics start measuring their time. See, because we measure time by cycle ages. But when we took on the Roman concepts, we've lost contact with life length, and also with our connection to Earth. Because the vibrational harmonics is very, very important for life cycle. So our lives are shortened because we're out of harmony with nature. But that gives the Albion an opportunity to rule. See, so what we think, as we think, it has much to do with our connection to the Earth and the electrical grid on the Earth. But just keep in mind, like say if you go to like Sierra Leone and Algeria, Tunis, etc., and take soil, and you go down in the land of flowers, and in Mexico, you'll see the soil organically is the same. I mean, this is known by archaeologists.
That's also the reason why.
Yeah.
Also the reason why they found Stone Mountain, Georgia, the same material that was made in the pyramids and?
Of course.
Okay.
Because
They're both one and the same.
see, this is the deal. From a political, sociological perspective, one of the major aspects of social engineering to neutralize airship is to promote any dynamics, whether you're dealing with sociology, archaeology, geography, is to disconnect our people from this land. So this is even why the so-called, what they tag as black diaspora, has been given so much support, is to disconnect these people from the land. Also, the problem that they had in the 40s with what Senator Bilbo and them in the earlier period, and what was that period when Bilbo and them was trying to set, that was in 30s or 40s, I think it was. But also these has much to do with the dynamics with the praetor, the corporate praetor, Monroe, when they try to set up that colony of the North Grade heirs at Liberia. And of course, the problem that the Asiatics have there in Liberia with the other Asiatics who welcomed us outside of that Christianized mentality that we brought over there. I used to talk to the ambassador's brother, used to call me on a regular basis in 93, 4, and 5 on a regular basis in Liberia, and we used to discuss some of the problems that was happening in Liberia. And I reminded him, that the people that they brought from the North Gate to Liberia, they have, we got blood connections, but their home is here. And so they go over there with that Negro Christianized mentality, even when it's mixed with Islam. They still got that Constantinian mentality. And the rest of the world, even though they're contaminated too, understand, but we looked at it pretty much as absolute, total, intolerable traitors. But we do have the advantage of having access to some things that they don't have, because when with the Unum Sanctum operations, Weishaupt and all of them, and with the Rockefellers, etc., and the Knights Templars, a lot of their focus concentration of converting the wealth under the Unum Sanctum to the Popes of Rome, a lot of the other Asiatic nations suffer economically worse than we do, although they have massive resources. They have no access to it. But we have access to fiat in some ways that they don't, but we don't have the consciousness of how to use it. So that's how the European keeps the Asiatics here pretty much in check. But again, a lot of those areas need to be intellectually and factually bridged. And a lot can be fixed, and a lot more people actually from the East will come to our aid if they could sense that we weren't so hell-bent on being the Negro traitors that we are, and keep defending these Negro wars to keep this European in power and then hiding behind Jesus type thing. That's probably one of the biggest areas of the problems that a lot of Asiatics have with us. But anyway, when you're dealing with the deal that Bilbo was doing, I think it was do the researches of the congressional records. That's when Bilbo was trying to get more of the Asiatics here, over there, and of course that was rejected because they was tired of them first Negroites coming over there with that black stuff, disrespecting, because they come with this, self-righteous thing, we saved, Jesus made us, didn't make nobody else type thing, and everybody knows it's a fraud, and then they go there with that judgmental type stuff, and everybody know that they're really working for Rome. But after a few generations, they actually start believing their own lies. So that's where the problem that we have. And then these people will, as soon as Rome tell them that these people ain't Christians, our people go murder them, keep this Roman in power, and then come back and do some Negro marches again, because they didn't get Negro badges for another war that they fought against their own blood. So we have to kind of do the best that we can to try to fix some of this stuff, because, the Medea effect comes in. This is really what we're being faced with now. Medea effect is basically, to keep it very simple, Earth life kind of operates with nature making adjustments or giving warnings. When any life form gets to what are called an apex, that it gets far away from its purpose, then nature comes in and nature starts killing it off. Meaning that you don't need wars to do it. Nature herself, that's called the Medea effect. In other words, you have a tipping point where you're allowed to kind of imagine like this. So imagine this divine law, right? This platform. Imagine this divine law. And imagine that that's jurisprudence, and then you have legislation, or what you call civic law. How tight that is tied to the nature of divine law, harmonic, has much to do with the longevity or the possibility of longevity of a civilized, organized government. The closer it is in harmony with nature's law, the longer it has a tendency to live. The more farther it is away from recognizing divine law, which means real civil law is actually derived from a study of nature's law. Or like you'll see, like Jefferson and them talked about in the, and Madison and them talked about in the preamble, where it says nature's law, nature's God. You're talking the Zodiac Constitution. All right. Now, when you violate that, see, because nature doesn't recognize person or station. Nature herself, see, anything that does not recognize its own origin honor, which means it's still, if you want to look at it from more or less a Kabbalistic point of view, or more of a metaphysical point of view, take the statement, honor your mothers and your fathers that your days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God is giving thee. Convert that into a metaphysical principle. The honor of your mother and father is a recognition of your origin, or your God principle. Meaning that you can't talk about a God outside of them without not acknowledging them. That's your source. And it was denied Stargate. Don't talk about a greater power beyond the Stargate, because you'll never get into that Stargate again. Look at it the same way. All right? So in civil law, in the operation of jurisprudence, and jurisprudence is the science that deals of positive law. Although in the science of jurisprudence, you'll study color of law, but that's only because it has to give you what you call a polar opposite to recognize. And so you have maxims of law and maxims of ethics. And so these principles are used by anyone in the metaphysical construction of covenants and constitutions, that they do not stray away from the divine principle. It goes like this. So a high priest or persons who are deceivers, and this is why when you see the dark priesthood, they themselves know the law. But the trick is sort of like a jackal, is to deceive people who fake spirituality, who are not really harmonic with the common law, to give them legislation or statutes for the dead, corporation, and then call it law and deceive them into falling over the edge, then going and devouring them.
Okay.
While they themselves, knowing the law, will come to this edge, but will never falter.
Right. But they'll deceive.
Because they know that divine law don't recognize personal station. They can't get away from it. You get the whole point? And this is why a lot of priesthood will never teach what are called the Hermetic principles. Although all major religions are rooted in Hermetic law. They will act like they're separate venues. while all the priesthood got Bibles, Quran, Uwaspi, the Vedas, etc. You understand? But then when they come amongst the masses, the different clubs got only the Bible or only the Quran, you know, and they compartmentalize the people so they can control them. It's called secularism or denominations, when the truth is really one. So the priesthood themselves, they keep the truth for their selfish selves, and then they give pieces of it out in the name of sects. This is where, like you see Prophet Muhammad say, there shall be no secularism in Islam. They got about 78 of them. You understand? Where Yahshua said the truth is one, they got about 59,000 denominations, and then some. You know, this is where the priests, the prophets are always having to dispute with the doctrines of the law. The priesthood does this. No demon does this. It's the priesthood that do this. And then they suck off the people because the people not knowing maxims. Keep this in mind, maxims. Matter of fact, write that down. Maxims of law, maxims of ethics. And so when you're looking at constitutions and covenants, you always measure them by constitutional principle. This is another reason why a lot of people who fake like they're really supporting the Moorish divine national movement will stay away from constitutional instruction. Because once you have fundamental rules, you measure everybody by those fundamental rules. Doesn't matter what walk of life. Because the Constitution also comes from body construct. You understand? So, as an example, on another level, principle of Constitution. When you understand the principle of 12 salts and 12 phosphates that woman uses to build the body, you can either look at a birth chart and pretty much tell, again, the tendencies for certain sicknesses or weaknesses in the body and know what foods or things nature to give them the herb-bearing fruit that, like the Bible talks about, that every herb-bearing tree shall be food for you or meat for you. This is why the priests have to tell people that the dead carcasses, which is the morgue, is the meat section. When the meat is really the fruits and the nuts. See, they reverse everything. This is how the priesthood creates sickness. Then they can do what? Capitalize on the sicknesses of the poor that they themselves create. They say the devil did it. See what the devil did? We're over here doing goody stuff. And then the devil came over here and messed with us goody stuff people. And everybody suspects that he's the vampire. And it's worked pretty good. You know, this is again why they don't teach constitutional principles, because you'll be able to see them vampires too. You know, that's why, again, when people who kind of have a reasonable knowledge of the ancient world history and philosophies, why when you go in any church, mosques, or synagogues, temples, with people who really have a background in scholarship that know the history, why it makes them people uncomfortable. Because you can walk in a room and you have a different energy. We're talking about how nature works. And so a vampire recognizes you when you walk in the room. It makes them sick. It's just like, you know, like going to a vampire's party and somebody talking about light the candles and he's saying no. You know, it's the same thing, you know, because your energy changes. You know, so this is, again, the discomfort. If you have a little bit of light, we can say if you have light that's growing, you know, vampires will recognize you immediately. You know, that's why a lot of times they'll pick you, they'll throw out certain questions to try to see where you are, and then start ostracizing you. Because as soon as you walk in the room, they can sense the energy. Because they themselves are high priests. Because remember, dark priests know the truth. They just ain't for it. Because they can't suck. Vampires don't want you getting in turtleneck sweaters. I ain't Irish. You know, this drooping neckline like this and stuff. Yeah. You know, but again, point that I'm making is we desire to our limit, even with our flaws and shortcomings, to try to share with people fundamental truths that they can start using to measure us and anyone else. And also, when we're wrong, pull our coattail. And those who would take advantage of them, they can easily see them like that. And when you see people having any difficulty trying to comprehend what's going on, you know that they're just simply missing certain keys. So a lot of times what we try to do is study ourselves and study people when we travel the country and glean from the different questions that people ask, and you can see what pieces are missing, and then try to do the best you can to insert those pieces to liberate the people. Because in the truth of human liberation, follower degrees are left behind. It's not that it doesn't serve its purpose, but that's for like children, rabbits, donkeys, and imbeciles. You know, when you're dealing with people that's symbolized by Yahshua, who they code name is Jesus, he comes to liberate people. He didn't come to make you a follower of nothing. He only leads you to truth, that you might do what he himself did. This is why you'll see him say things like, as I am, all men shall be. What I've done, all men can do. And some of you will even do greater works than I've done, which he's telling you that there's other degrees. He just came to show you the way in order for you to be liberated from the dark priesthood who you have trusted in the name of God. Notice that. In the name of God, not in God's. See, because God is a generic term. Because the very Satan, Lucifer, that they worship is also God. This is why the priesthood will always throw the word God around loosely, like it's the name of supreme being known at the masses who can't read, don't know better. They're like little boys and girls. And those are the major ones he's rapes. Those are the ones that they usually make their living off of. You know, and then they use them against people who wake up to attack them like little minions, like little demons. Always talk about love. And as soon as you don't give Reverend Jones $5, they want you to take your children on I-95 at lunchtime and play. And want you to be burned and in hell and all this stuff. Misery. They're very hateful and dangerous people. But if you watch them, they let their demons out. As soon as you don't give Reverend Jones $5. Jesus is half. Islam.
Since we know that God is a Middle English,
It means good.
it means good.
It's not a negative, it means good, yeah.
But my question is, what in the references within the Bible where God is mentioned, I'm assuming that there were other terms that it probably replaced. I mean,
This
what
is
is
why
a monad, for
it would
instance?
give you, like if you go in the Schofield Bible, it'll tell you Allah. That's why a lot of priests don't expose the Schofield Bible. You know, like scholars have it. But most of the, and then in others they'll say Abba, A-B-B-A. And then one Allah, Abba, Adonai, you know, but the deal of it is, if you're going to represent what you call the positive or the negative gods, then you must name the God. It's no different than we say woman. So, and I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you say, well, which one? No big deal. You know, be specific. So I'm talking to Dr. Naila. You understand now? Somebody else might be named Naila, but most likely not. You could be, but then we'd have to be specific, wouldn't we? So it is. You know, this is the reason why most of the dark priesthood will never teach people ancient religion principles or the Kabbalistic principles from which modern dogma in the name of religion is presented to the masses for mind control. This is why a lot of scholars who really know the truth of history will say religion is the opiate for the masses. I suggest that that's a misuse of word. They should say dogma is the opiate for the masses presented as religion. because religion has been given a bad name by the dark priesthood themselves, who keep pretending to be religious, although they know religion. You know, it's why they will never tell people, as an example, say, whereas anyone that has any scholarship can easily, say, go to an ephemerides and then go to a sequential study of history of dogma systems in the name of religion and prove that all your major holidays are based on a movement of the moon. While at the same time, the people who lead these different orders in the name of religion will deny that true religion has anything to do with astrology or cosmogony, which what religion is, cosmogony. But then they would have to break down the cosmological ephemerides nature of the books and then have people start guiding their lives aright without the priesthood, because you no longer need the priesthood. You see, once you learn the truth, you don't need the middleman. You know, and we were talking on the way up. This is one of the things I had planned to do, but I've been quite busy. Of course, you know that. I'm going to do that. I wanted to print off chapter 8 of the chapter from Book of the East, of the Solemn Brotherhood of the East. And I think that's one thing that should be shared with the masses. Also with your art, if it please you, to take that chapter, and I was reading a couple of them with that typo error, but I want to fix that and present it to you, and then structure it and just share it with people. You know, and then you can also see why a lot of priesthood don't want people to get their hands on any of your Eastern culture philosophies, because it will expose the priesthood. Just like all of a sudden you see them like a neon sign. You do, you know, but long as people are in darkness or not aware how things work, meaning, see, this is the deal. When people are steeped in belief systems and trained that the belief systems constitutes religion, the dark priesthood already got them. You understand? Let me show you something. Y'all got this? If anybody don't have this, go ahead and take a photo of it so you can study it later. Because we can, you know, concept-wise. Everybody got this?
Yep.
All right. And also, I want to give props to and show my appreciation for Sister Delilah, who consistently, you know, does the best she can to videotape and to share the videotapes with others so they can learn, and also Dr. Naila for sharing with the people, etc. But let's look at this.
Also, you you all want to get food, want you to get it before drop by kitchen packed up.
And part of even the question that you asked a little while ago, Dr. Naila, is why I did the book Worship Dispeller.
Yes.
And it's an etymological approach to God, to the word God, putting it in perspective, although it's heavily abbreviated. And it's not an etymological work in its nature, but it implies a degree of etymology to remove the spookism and the mystery of the word God, you know. But also, as a reminder to people in all of your secret societies, whether you're dealing in Knights Templar, Eastern Star, Masonry, you know, Skull and Bones Illuminati, etc., almost all institutions and secret societies use an ancient ritual coming from ancient Sumeria It's actually called Sumer. They'll say Sumer, it's actually Sumer. Actually Sumeria, ancient Lemuria, ancient Hikkupta, which is codified as Egypt. Egypt is the password. It's really Hikkupta, right? And they'll have a cube, and that cube, so you'll have to excuse my scribble. And they'll make an altar, and they call it an altar, and they make it out of usually seven rare woods. And there's another lesson, our relationship with plant life. But 7 rare woods, and from different points of the earth, from noble points of earth. These are energy center, portal energy centers on the earth. Keep in mind all of your major temples, and later some of the temples called churches, are built upon ancient civil temples and ancient noble points. Are we clear? And this is so that the dark priesthood can control. Are we clear? They will have these altars, and they would dress them up, as an example, say maybe like this, and they'd be in gold and silver, and sometimes in your more ancient ones, rare jewels, etc. And these altars will be made out very elaborate. Sometimes they have inlaid woods in them and stuff like that. I mean, they're very, very, very fancy. I mean, like, you can forget affording to build one if you really want to get serious in your ancient altars. A lot of them have been preserved. And in your modern era, some of them are extremely expensive, but still imitations. Your more older ones are literally priceless, meaning that you couldn't even put a price on them. Do you understand? And then what they would do, they would kneel, they would raise someone like to the priesthood, and you kneel before this altar, and they'd have on the altar old, say, like 4 Vedas or R.A.M. or Septuaginta, or in your more modern term, Bible, and usually alternative Ecclesiastes, etc. And then the candidate would rise before that, and they'd have 3 candlesticks around it. And the first candlestick is belief. And this is why I did this in the Wordship Dispeller, although I kept it brief. And I did that more or less to liberate people. So it's not so much a lesson in itself, but to liberate, if you get the point. So they symbolize, in the first light, it symbolizes belief as like a beginner, like a little child, something like that, And then the middle light is faith, and that's as you begin to get some learning, start exercising, testing things and stuff like that. And fruition is when you have become pretty much in control or have a comprehension of the disciplines of earth living. Although life goes on from cradle to grave, you're in closer to some level of competence. So everything that has a front has a back. And so at the basis of belief, that would be a neophyte. Or you can call it a beginner. Sometimes called a journeyman. Faith, scholar. And fruition is master. And so when you get anybody that's an imam, a rabbi, master mason, Knights Templar, Skull and Bones, Thule Society, they're on that third light. Do you understand? In this degree, you're not a rabbinate. You're a rabbinate when you get in this degree. You understand? You earn this degree. This is why the masses, for the most part, don't even know this. Most of the masses aren't even aware of this degree. They know, they heard this before, belief, and they heard this before, faith. And most of the masses, you present this to them, their eyes get crossed, they don't know what the swell you're talking about. But yet all the priesthood know what that is because that's where they got their degree. It's their masters. Now the problem that you have is the corruption is here. That's where the problem is. And they've been taking advantage of these people, keeping them suppressed into the lesser light. You see, so daemon, or what you call daemon, or the demon, daemon, D-E-A, or D-A-E, the daemon simply means God of the lesser light. That's all it means. You understand? So when you're looking at daemons, you're looking at gods of the lesser light. So you're looking at light in degrees. So you're dealing with positive and negative, or polars, polarity, you see? So you got the earth, right? North, right? North, east, west, and south. And your capacity to do what? Read the stars and give the news. That's where you get news from. You understand? And so when you see the three wise men follow the stars, they're MAs, they're master astrologers. When you see doctors, and medical doctors doing operations on the human forms, and you see them do them in clusters, they're looking at a chart and seeing the movement of the moon so they don't bleed to death. While at the same time trying to act like they don't deal with this reality. Because they're usually promoting dogma in the name of religion, while true religion they keep for themselves because that's where the power is. Do you understand? Like when people in hospice, they're pathologists anyway. You know, who cares for the people? The nurses do. The docs are playing God. Go ahead.
Two questions. One, I'll go back far. Hopefully, you can get back there. When you mentioned the wars, as far as the nature cleansing, that's what you said. How do you distinguish when nature is cleansing versus deliberate acts of war?
This is all you have to do. Once you understand fundamental Kabbalistic principles or Hermetic principles, you can pretty much measure everything. This is back to the point. If you know the rules of the game, you can know when somebody's cheating. Or when they're not dealing with the issue or the rules of the game. Let me see if I don't know if I have this. I think I'll put it on there. Let me see. I don't know if I did. There's 7 elements of jurisdiction, so we can't. I think I'll put that on there, right? No. The 7 Hermetic principles. So I didn't put that on there. I'm gonna make sure I put that on there. But I got the holy names as an example, and also the 7 elements. So you understand the significance that the number 7 plays in the society or in Earth society. Like for instance, like when you see in churches and temples and mosques, you see them have the 7 golden candlesticks. Or you see Muslims make 7 counterclockwise circumvations around the cube, Kaaba. 7 times counterclockwise. You're dealing with the rotational pathways of the 7 ruling planets in this particular solar system. And so each one of those candlesticks, or like we see in the book of Revelation when it says, I heard one speak with the voice of many waters, and he was standing among 7 golden candlesticks. Well, those candlesticks are called Eloi, 7 Eloi. Those are symbolic of the 7 ruling planets. The word holy